It's not like, it's just, I think the thing is that we feel, we don't just choose themes or choose topics that we're going to talk about because, we get a big message from C3 Global saying this is what you've got to preach on. We pray, we see where the church is at, we ask for direction, guidance and wisdom from the Almighty Jesus to help us lead this church in the direction He wants to go. And so we, with this whole theme and everything, we just thought, well, let's just keep going a bit deeper. Because we believe you guys are good to go deeper. We wouldn't be going deeper today if we know you're not ready for it. But we believe as a family, as a unit, as a community, we're ready it's like an onion being peeled back like layers. We're ready for another layer. Are you guys ready for that today?
Yeah.
Even though you don't know what that looks like yet, but just be open with us. That's all we ask.
Can we read that quote to start?
Yes.
From Brene Brown. And I think that's going to just help.
Yeah, it says this: vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, and joy. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, and joy.
Totally. So we're doing this series on love. We are, I don't know how many weeks into it now, but we are talking about now, we're honing in, we've explored the love of God, that He is. We've explored the love of God for us. We've explored the great reversal of the effects of sin on our lives to reconnect us to perfect love. And most people here have been tracking with us for the last number of weeks, and so we've established that, but we really want to focus in on this thought of loving one another and what that looks like. And there's, last week we had our dear friend Luke, which I, just think was so helpful, and seems like one of the great takeaways from last week was the thought of the in and out, that the whole rhythm of life is that there's ins and there's out, and that love with one another is an in and it's an out. It's something that we need to receive from one another, but it's something that we need to pour out to others, and there's this great flow of in and out. And I thought that's apt because some of us find it hard to receive and are always giving out, which is equally as dangerous as always receiving and never giving out. Both lack a rhythm of life. And so we are attempting to sit in this space for not forever, but for long enough to let something shift within the heartbeat of our community to a place that we more deeply reflect the intensity of the command of Jesus to love God and love one another. And I think there's so much, really, you could talk about this for so long, and we'll talk about sort of key elements that we feel God breathing on this particular season, not just going through, a theology book on all the elements of what that looks like, but, before we talk about what it looks like to love one another and things like showing mercy and things like honoring, and it's like this thing about vulnerability. This word was just dropped in my heart last Monday after our Sunday services. I was reflecting on it. And I feel like it's exactly that. Vulnerability is this atmosphere that I believe God would have His people cultivate in the community of God. That is the doorway to loving people. So I feel like if you don't walk through this doorway, then we can talk about all the stuff that you can do to love one another, but we're going to miss the point. Because the whole point of this word, and I don't think I've ever preached on vulnerability, but it's just like the Lord dropped that word on the inside of us, so we're just sort of going to have a chat about it. And we're going to actually ask you what you think about it. We're going to get Mentimeter out, it's going to be amazing. But the whole thought is this, that if we are going to, we're being joined with Christ and brought back into the perfect love dance of God, and that has happened with other people, that it's so easy, so often we've talked about this individualistic thing where we come and we seek God individually in the same room. But for me, the phrase that just rings in my mind with vulnerability is that vulnerability is doing a transparent journey before God and letting other people see it. And I believe if we're going to be genuinely connected and have an atmosphere that is conducive for love, yes, we should be individuals going on a journey with God. So we're all on this journey that's going to last our entire life of being made more in the image of perfect love. We're going to be made more in the image of God. We're going to experience the love of God more purely. And you know what? That's messy. That's full of brokenness. And unless we learn to allow other people to glance into the journey that we're doing for God, I don't think that we can say that we're really connected and together and united in the way that Jesus said, may they be one as you and I are one, Father. Like, that is a deep unity and a deep connection point. And so we want to talk a little bit today about this thought of letting others into our God journey. And a little bit around that. So, anything that you wanted feeling to lead into first, or?
I'd love to read this because this is a great book. I know she's not a Christian. I don't know. She says she'll be saved one day if she's not. But it's beautiful. She's been studying for years vulnerability and shame culture, and she's amazing. But I read this morning. I'm like, it's so true, because I think, we'll get into it a bit later about my journey of vulnerability. But I just felt like this kind of recaps the journey of what we're going through. It says this: as children, we found ways to protect ourselves from vulnerability, from being hurt, diminished, and disappointed. We put on armour. We used our thoughts, emotions, and behaviours as weapons. And we learned how to make ourselves scarce, even to disappear. Now as adults, we realise that to live with courage, purpose and connection, to be the person who we long to be, we must again be vulnerable. We must take off the armour, put down the weapons, show up and let ourselves be seen.
Yeah, let ourselves be seen. I love that. How many of us show up and don't let ourselves be seen? It's like, I'm gonna put some projection of strength, got it all together, I'm all good, so that, I might be, being vulnerable with God's one thing, but letting yourself be seen by someone else is just a whole nother ballgame. And I deeply believe that we have to, in this age of church, that one of the greatest needs for church is to cultivate an atmosphere and a culture of vulnerability. So even last night, I spoke at Thrive Church on the Central Coast, and we had a discussion on anxiety. And if we have time, I'll share more about that later. But that is something that I've walked through some very, very dark days in that regard over the last 3 years. But what I've noticed is that we've created this atmosphere in churches that almost requires and celebrates perfection, rather than celebrating and valuing brokenness and journey. And so what we have is we have pastors who are expected to be superhumans, and therefore I see so many pastors going through brokenness around the world, but they don't feel like they can be honest about where they're at. And vice versa. Therefore, what message does that send to congregations? It means that, that person has it all together, so I better have it all together. And so we have this divide amongst the whole community of faith where no one feels like they can be transparent because there's such a stigma and shame around going through seasons and journeys of being broken and not okay. And so our conviction is, and what we've tried to model in Nairobi and to start doing the same here, is to say that we personally cannot be people that are anything but honest and vulnerable about where we're at, and to try and promote within our community this thought that yes, we are individuals pursuing God, but we not only, why is this? This is important. It's good for us as individuals to be vulnerable, and it's good for other people when we are vulnerable. Everyone benefits. Last night, seeing an altar of people crying about their journey with mental illness because a couple of us just decided that we'd just be honest about our story around that. And, you know, it's funny, you know, the altar call. The altar call is such a funny thing, right? Because it's the ultimate thing that requires vulnerability. Coming out the front for someone to pray for you. When the pastor...
It's almost called the walk of shame.
The walk of shame. Because shame is the opposite of vulnerability. Shame is the resistor of vulnerability. And so, you know, the pastor opened up last night, said you can come and get some prayer. You know, it's like Mars out here. It's like no one, nothing going on out there. One person. It's always one person, right? That says, stuff what everyone thinks. I'm going to be vulnerable. And this guy walks out and then give it 15 seconds and the thing's filled of people wanting to be vulnerable but not feeling safe enough. So the whole thought of, now talk to me about this, because the whole thought of vulnerability is that it's risky, right? Being vulnerable means that you're open to attack or being mistreated in some way. That's what vulnerability is. So for me, vulnerable is risky relationship. It's saying I'm going to take a risk on the people around me, and I'm going to trust that they're going to steward my vulnerability with respect and honour and dignity. But how do you balance trust and vulnerability? Like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you jump out and be vulnerable and then wait for trust? Do you wait until trust is built to be vulnerable?
Great question. Because I think it is a big myth, and she talks about this in the book, that trust has to come, that it's a myth that trust has to come before vulnerability. But she says, where does she says? We need to trust to be vulnerable, and we need to be vulnerable in order to build trust.
Yeah, right. So you do need some level of trust.
Yes.
To bear your honesty.
Some relationship, I would say.
But then at the same time, you'll never fully trust if there is no vulnerability.
If there's no, and I think just to go back to what you said about that open door, I think we've all met someone who you just go, it's almost like no one's emotionally home. And then, you know, it's like you're talking to a wall almost. And I love those ones. I call them my onions. They're my little mission to peel them back. But I feel like we've all experienced meeting someone like that. And I would say that they're just gone, I'm not going to be vulnerable with you. I'm hurt, I'm broken. And they've shut that door.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess, you know, really this little short conversation today, we're going to share some stories with you, but this short conversation today, again, I hate preaching topics like this because I get to 1 week and go, we could sit on this for 4 weeks. We could just keep talking about this. But it's our desire that we would, as a church community, be more community and less corporate. That we be less along the lines of being perfect, putting on masks, pretending to be something that we're not, in order to make other people think a certain thing. And that we would go, I guess it's like this, right? If vulnerability and trust go hand in hand, I guess it's hand in hand. I guess it's one step for one step. It's like we take a risk on someone, and then as they prove to be good stewards with that vulnerability, we take another step. And the more we step deeper into vulnerability and that's proven to be trustworthy, then trust is built in a meaningful way. Definitely, if someone, like I've say things from the pulpit sometimes, and you'll hear more and more, that some pastors go, that's too risky. That's too risky. People are going to think you're weak. And my response would be, good. I'm glad that they would find that out.
So true.
Because it's true.
Remember how I told you as well, I remember sitting in a leadership meeting, this is going back to pastors and leaders, this whole, you know, generations gone by of not being very vulnerable. But I remember him saying, he goes, when you're on the pulpit, the main thing is that you don't be vulnerable with your people. They need to know that you're in control, that your emotions aren't out of control, and that you're in control. Because if you're out of control, they're going to be out of control. And And so I remember just time and time again, and I didn't really share this with anyone because I'm like, well, I'm in a leadership, I'll just take that. That's, obviously something that I've got to apply to my life. I remember time and time again speaking at the church we came from, C3 Tuggerah, and I'm speaking on something that's so raw to my heart, but telling myself, don't you dare cry, Jamie, because if you cry, then that shows that you're vulnerable, and you're not. You're a strong leader. You've got to keep it together. You've got to make sure that you're smiling still. And I remember one day, just before I got up, I was already, I think I was doing the communion message. I mean, how hard is it not to cry during a communion message? And so I got up, and I remember and the Lord whispered in the ears, and he said, let it flow, Jamie. And I'm like, what do you mean, talking? He goes, no, let your tears flow. And I got up there, and I literally, the microphone's like this, and I was bawling. And then next, I'm not saying anything, and I look around, and people are crying. And God said, that's why I created tears for. Because tears are healing. Tears are tears of joy. Tears are tears of healing. And we have to allow people to cry and be vulnerable. And if you portray that from the stage, that'll flow into your congregation. So I made a vow from then on, I'm going to be vulnerable.
Yeah, beautiful. And so maybe we can share a couple of times that we've done that and some of the positive that's come from it. And I think one of the ones that was most powerful and helpful for us was when we were in Africa, and we lost we had 2 miscarriages, believing for Elsie to come. And both of those times were really, really tough. Yeah, it's hard to talk about, yeah.
I'm so over this being a silent battle in the church, and I think that's why we didn't choose this topic, because we're going to cry about it and then make you cry. We've shared this story many times without crying, actually. But it is such a silent battle, and that's why I knew Jesus. When we went through it, we just wanted to hibernate, we just wanted to hide and not go to church. But Jesus said, if you allow me into this situation and believe that all my promises are yes and amen, and I'll be with you, I would love for you to share this with your community so they can grieve with you. Because we didn't have family. The church was our family. And so I think it was our 2nd year in maybe, so we're still developing a relationship with our church. And I remember Garth getting up and he said, I was a blubbering mess on the front, but I just knew I had to be there and be obedient to what God wanted. And he just shared, look, if we're a little out of sorts the next few weeks, please pour grace on us, because we've just been through this. And we've been waiting for a miracle for years, and then this has happened, and we're really discouraged, actually. Don't bombard Jamie with questions and everything, but just, love on us the best way you can. That's all we ask, because you're our family. Anyway, after it, I had about 5 or 6 women come up to me and just saying, thank you so much. Thank you so much that you shared that, because I realised I haven't grieved. I realised I haven't been honest. I realised, just women telling me stories of how they've lost so many children and, through different reasons, and couldn't talk about it, and it was a silent battle, and they had to just sit and be quiet in church and not grieve properly. And so after, it was the most probably powerful service I've ever been in after the service, when we're in a circle and all crying and processing and grieving together. And one lady got down and she's on literally hugging my feet, and I'm just bawling like a baby. And she said, we're here for you, Mama, we're here for you. And it's just so beautiful, because then we knew from that day on, God said to me, he said, Jamie, there's going to be a mandate over your church where you're going to see barriers broken off your church. So it was multi-layer. It wasn't just to bring hope into people, it was actually to break something demonic over our church. Thank you, my friend. And we're still we're seeing miracles, and we still have so many people in our church who are believing for miracles. And even in this church, we're believing for miracles, and people who visit are coming in and believing for miracles. We got to pray for a couple weeks ago, our friends. No one knew their story, and Peter and Chantel and Jody came up and prayed for them and said, I believe you're going to have children. And they've been through a whole process, a huge process. They've been waiting 5 years for children, and they didn't know their story. We didn't share that with them. So I believe the same thing is going to flow over this church as well. Same thing. But yeah, just us being vulnerable and actually risky. It was risky because I'm like, I don't want to be bombarded with calls and how are you going and are you trying again, and I just wanted to feel the warmth and love, and I absolutely felt that.
And I guess it's like to say as well, being vulnerable doesn't mean everyone has to know every detail of your world.
Yeah, that's true.
And sometimes being supporting people to create vulnerability is to not say some things.
Yeah.
So we've just noticed how silly it is to ask people about when they're going to get married or when they're going to have babies, or like it's so dumb, hey, on so many levels. It's like it's well-meaning, but like I remember people saying, "Oh yeah, you guys should have a baby." It's like, yeah, we're trying, we're trying. Thanks for that. But and so I think that's pretty helpful as well. Just to know, it's not about just going, okay, now let's tell everyone that we've never spoken to every detail of our life, but it's, for instance, standing, like we've got to, I believe that, if I just come back to the altar call thing, I believe we've got to be able to break this silly thought that if you need prayer, that you're a weak, wrong person. Like I went to like every altar call, like, and we've got to stop, and if we stop assuming and reading into someone walking down the front, then it'll probably make it a lot easier for people to feel safe. Like, don't make an assumption, like, you don't know what they're responding to. I went to every altar call for about 2 years as a young Christian, and they go, I don't know, I probably responded to ones for pregnancy, I don't know, I'm just like, anyone that you
I do remember being at a women's event and I came forward to the altar call and we're like, alright, we're just going to take it, we're just going to... He was believing for something.
I'm just like, I just want as much impartation on my life as I can get. And so let's stop making assumptions. Let's stop trying to read into people's stories. Let's just steward whatever they're willing to communicate, and just be there. And so that was incredible. Like, even just to touch on this journey that I've had with anxiety, that when I 2 years into how do I give a summary, because I want you to tell your little journey at the end as well. But just a moment last night going that I was a bit of a fearful kid growing up. At the time, I didn't realise that. I just thought that that's how I am. But only looking back and experiencing transformation did I realise, there was some fearful thinking that wasn't good. But when I came to the Lord, that whole sanctification process thing of being more like Jesus, I learned things like renewing your mind and taking captive thoughts, and I was totally changed. Like, that fear was broken off my life, and I went from this fearful guy to this faith-filled guy that, could get to the point of selling everything and moving to Africa, starting a church, things like that. And I'm like, that thing's done, sweet. 2 years in, there's a health thing that triggers, underlying things on the inside, and I find myself in deep anxiety, and I didn't actually identify what it was for a year. I thought it was physical illness happening to me. I'm getting lung tests, and I'm short of breath. What's happening? I'll get a lung test. Oh, that's fine. It's like, you keep telling me I'm fine, but I don't feel fine. And so anyway, I realised that I'm experiencing an anxiety disorder. And so I realised, okay, yes, I dealt with, because this is the thing as well, you don't arrive. In fact, you almost go forward and back continually. Because it's like you get enough I got breakthrough in my life over fear to a degree that was inadequate for a single 20-year-old teacher. But when you become a married, believing for a family, cross-cultural church plants are in your mid-30s, it's a different level of pressure, and you get older, you realise you're not immortal, all these things kick in, and it's like this, you reach a threshold and something comes down, right? So I spent that's a tough couple of years at the end of our time in Nairobi there. Like, a lot of my time.
Yeah, I just remember literally Monday to Saturday, just in bed, but trying to build up the energy to preach on Sunday, because I have to just keep committing to that at least. Otherwise, I feel like I've completely failed.
Yeah.
And I would say it was like the enemy walked into my house and ripped the very heart out of my husband's chest. That's how I explain the 2 years. And but this, this is the beautiful thing, that even, because I'm so used to this one being so strong, and that's how beautiful, like with marriage, it's so lovely that God balances it out for you. It's never, I don't know if you found this, but we always find that we're never both going through such a significant trial. It's always one, and the other one can support the other. So I just felt like I had the strength and the courage and the faith to, I even had to start leading the church and doing things I never thought I'd be doing at 27, 28
Someone
years
said
old.
Lord had to get me out of the way and stop doing everything and stop being a control freak. Yeah.
But that was amazing to see as well, because we had staff in our house, and every morning, even if they turned up early, they would hear Garth praying and crying out to God in his office and saying, just one more day, God, just give me strength for one more day. And that was like a whole nother level of vulnerability happening in our house with our staff.
Yeah, and when I realised what was going on, I'm just like, I'm going to tell these guys. Like, why pretend to be, like, I'm like, you're going to notice that I'm not doing a great job.
Yeah. There would be Sundays where you'd actually have to sit down because you felt so weak.
Yeah, like I was
Share
like,
with the
all sorts of
church.
things. Feet, I had acute pain. And,
Yeah.
I'm just like, remember one time I had to get you up to do the altar call because I'm like, I've got no breath, I think I'm going to faint. Like, it's just crazy, right? So, but anyway, like the good news, like the positive thing is that, I've learned so much and have gone on this journey. I'm not out of the, it's not gone, but I never thought I'd be back at a place of strength, and it feels amazing. But last night, I was just sitting in the worship before talking to a group of people about anxiety, and I just said, Lord, thank you that I'm here. Because I was almost giving up ministry. I thought, I can't do this. I can't run churches anymore. I can't run one church, let alone two anymore. And so I'm going, Lord, thank you that I didn't know if I was going to have this future, and now I feel more broken but stronger than ever before. Yeah. And I'm like,
I think
Lord,
that's the whole thing,
grateful.
is that vulnerability leads to vulnerability.
Yes, that's right. And exactly.
So when you're portraying to someone that you're willing to be vulnerable, that you're willing to be risky and share something with them, it's almost like the other person goes, oh, he's a real human for once.
Yeah,
this is nice.
That's what Pastor Amy last night said. We got sat over a dinner table at a mutual friend's dinner when we first met. And I'm just like, I'm telling everyone and anyone about what I'm going through. I couldn't care. Like, I'm good. I'm on a journey. It's great. I'm learning things. And I told my story, and she said for her it was like a Holy Ghost assignment to sit near each other. And she said, because she was going through the same thing, didn't know things she could talk about it with anyone. And she said that was a breathe out moment for me. The first time I could breathe in years, and now we're standing, sitting on a stage together talking about our experiences and other people being blessed from it. So that's the thing, like, it's good. It's good for everyone when we can muster up enough courage and risk to just be honest about where we are. And I think if we create a community that is compassionate, gracious, kind, and values journey as much as destination, then I just reckon that's a really helpful environment where people can actually come forward and go, oh yeah, I actually am not doing too well as well. Can we talk about it? I think that's a church of the future for me. That's a church of the future.
So true. And I love it in Galatians 6:2. It says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ, which is love God, love people. But bear one another's burdens. And I think that's why I think it's hard as well, here's a little practical tip, to carry someone else's burdens if you're not releasing yours. So if you're constantly holding onto your burdens, you're going to have no capacity to hold someone else's burdens. But why does it say in Scripture that the house of God, our community, is called to bear one another's burdens? It's probably because we have to release them quicker and better, and be more vulnerable with people and allowing them into that space to pray with us. To, sometimes all you need to do is just sit there and have your listening ears on. A little rule to come up with as well is for Garth and I would just say to him, okay, Garth, this is a conversation. I'm going to share something with you, but I'm just venting. I don't need to be fixed.
I love fixing.
He loves fixing. All right, step 1, babe. You know, step 2, babe. I'm like, love your passion, babe. I just want to have a good old vent and allow my heart just to process something I've experienced, because I find that talking is healing. Has anyone else found that? That when you talk, when you go out for a nice coffee date, or you have a great bottle of wine with your friends around the table, eating good food, and conversation is flowing and it's just relaxed, and it's a beautiful thing when people can be vulnerable with one another. But that's a really nice way to start with even your spouse. Just start being a little bit more vulnerable with your spouse or a friend, but just say, hey, I just want to share, but actually don't need to be fixed right now. In fact, you can just pray with me at the end, that'd be beautiful. But we don't allow enough listening. We don't allow enough space for people just to talk, because, I took myself to a counsellor years ago because I told myself I'm never going to talk about church politics, and I shut down, and emotionally I shut down.
You're a pastor's kid.
Yeah, I'm a pastor's kid, and
seen a lot of church stuff.
Yeah, so I call that another silent battle, but it'd almost be like you hear all evil, see all evil, but speak no evil. And you are going through this journey with your family, and you know what, it's a beautiful journey as well, and it really prepared me for today. But it is a very vulnerable position to be in when you're a pastor's kid, and my parents did absolutely everything they could to protect me, but I was a discerner. So I could discern in them if there was something going on within the church that wasn't amazing, because the church is a messy place. But I remember just shutting down shop, literally emotionally. After church, I'd be the first one to run out that door, get in my car and drive away, because I'm like, I'm not talking to anyone. This was literally my motto: love God, hate the church. How bad's that? That's how broken I was, and I'll share, more details in another preach. But literally, just got to this place where I said, I love you, God. I'm willing to go to church, but I really don't like your people. They're horrible. They're backstabbing. They're people who don't really care about you or your family at the end of the day. And I just held. If you could unlock my heart, I could just pour out names to you from like even 10 years ago of people who hurt my family.
10 years before that.
Yeah.
So it's 20.
So that was me just going, you know what, I'm just going to shut down. So, but I got to the point in our first year of marriage, and Garth was like, why don't you just go speak to a stranger? Why don't you just go speak to someone where you can just go completely honest with no filters, not your family, not your friends, not even me. Why don't you just go and speak to a stranger? And that took so much courage.
So much courage.
I think I cancelled about maybe 10 times.
Yeah, and then you did it once, and then you cancelled it for another.
Terrified. I'm like, no, this is betrayal. I could never share, talk to this stranger about my family. My family are amazing. There's nothing wrong with them. Anyway, so I remember I finally got the courage, had some good shots of coffee, and turned up to the front door, and this lady opens the door. She was big grey hair, she got the dogs running around her feet. She goes, hello, brave one. No, I just started bawling, and I haven't cried in years. I hadn't cried. I told myself, do not cry. And yeah, I still see you today, because I do heart checks all the time. And that was a 6-year journey of dealing with people, because God told me, He said, Jamie, you're really going to hate your future if you don't learn to love again. And not even just as a minister, just as a Christian. If I don't get to a place where I don't learn to love the people I'm worshiping next to, I'm not going to stay. I'm going to run. And that's what we do. We're really good at running as Christians when things get tough. But to face the instrument, to face the tune, and to say, I'm gonna be in this rhythm, in this grace of healing along the way. And that's what I did, and that's what I still do. Even when I go back to visit C3 Tuggerah times, still people there, I go, I'm so glad I released you from my heart. I'm so glad I love you. I'm so glad that I see you as a human, and I'm a human, and we're all a big fat mess. But here we are, worshipping our almighty Jesus, who takes broken hearts. You know what I love the most, and I've seen it over and over again? I love how God takes something messy and He makes it beautiful. Yeah. And that is my story. Yeah. God took a very, very messy, broken lady who said, I don't even know how to love my spouse completely, because I couldn't even love myself, and I couldn't even love people around me, because I'm so broken with people. But that one conversation that started 1,000 conversations was where it began, and that's where you start. One conversation. And just allow the time and the space, allow the grace for yourself. You don't have to, I didn't go deep in that first conversation. I cried and I felt a lot better, and I just said, I think this is going to be a long journey. She goes, me too, and I'm in for it. And that was it. I was done. The hour was wrapped up. I think I cried for 55 minutes.
Totally. So, you know, so what's the whole point of all this? It's to just say...
Be vulnerable.
Yeah, it's to say that you please do not think that you have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Pressure release valve of every single person here. You don't have to be perfect to be here.
So true.
In fact, your brokenness and your journey is valued.
So true.
And is needed. And we understand that you're going to have seasons where you're up here and you're feeling good.
Yeah.
You're going to have seasons where you're down here and you feel like it's all falling
Yeah.
apart. And those seasons can sometimes happen in a week.
Yeah.
Those different things. But the desire is that we would create a culture where we can do a journey that is honest with God, and we could let other people see it in some degree. So yeah, I think that is the doorway for loving
that's
each other.
going back to that whole transformation that you talked about as well,
Right.
to be transformed in the image of Christ. We've got to be moving.
Yeah.
We've got to be taking steps forward, even though they can be painful ones. But you know, God turns our sorrow into joy.
Yeah.
And I sit here on this, what's this called, a stool, bearing my heart for you, saying, this is how far I've come. And now I get to actually be able to help other pastors' kids in the same situation as me, and just people, because this is the journey that I'm on.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. We're moving forward, we're transforming. I'm still transforming. I'm still going from glory to glory, but the more open, the more transparent I am with even my community, the more I get movement.
Yeah. And you know, even just to say, but there's zero pressure for what your pace and growth should look like. There is no textbook. There's nothing that someone's going to say, well, you should be. The word should is like this pressure word from the enemy to try and make you feel inadequate about where you are. As I should be, like, so for me, when I was experiencing anxiety in that darkest place, the biggest lie from the enemy that was going over my head was, you should be better than this. You're a church planter. You've the man of faith that did all that. You should be better than this. And I felt such a guilt that I was having this wrestle until I realized, God, I shouldn't be anything. I am what I am. And so there's no pressure on you. Pressure is a word that has been resonating in our hearts at the moment. Even like, I just want to, when I see someone putting pressure on themselves, I'm like, this world has enough pressure. Don't put more on yourself. There's other things in life that put pressure on us. Don't put any more on yourself than what. Like, there's just no need to. Like, I'm not. Yeah, there's so much that I just refuse to take pressure on these days. Like, yeah. Anyway, so just take pressure off yourself, and we're just walking together. Like, none of us really know where we're going or what we're doing, but we're following God. We're trying to love God, love people better than we did before. You know, not as just individually, just as we're always on that process. Yeah.
I think as well, it helps me to have grace for my community. I mean, when I see them as family. Now we've all got family members, and some got different personalities. There's always going to be a fight at Christmas Day. There's always going to be some potatoes thrown across the table, or whatever it is. It's made up of, even that's blood-related family. That can even be messy. But here, I just feel like we've got to get this thought out of our head. This is corporate. This is just a place that I come to on Sunday just to say hello, do my religious duty, and walk out the door. This is family. There is no plan B for the house of God. There is no emergency backup plan for the house of God. This is always and always will be God's plan A for us, to be in divine connection together, finding that beautiful rhythm. And I think the whole thing about today as well is being released to know that you can heal as you go. We're totally up for the wrestle for you to be messy. We're messy. We just bared our hearts before you. But we want you to know that we are going to hold your hand, and let's heal together as we continue to go and still have an impact on our community.
Yeah,
we still can be used. Look at all the people in the Word of God that God used. The most vulnerable, the most weak. No, not me, God, choose him. You know, the ones that were like, freaking out that they don't want to be chosen by God. They're the ones that God is still calling today. He's calling you and saying, open up your heart. Even if it's just a little bit. Even if you can just, I see a picture even now, like a prophetic picture of a door in people's lives, even today in this service, and it's almost like it's been unlocked, and it's just a little bit of a creak open. And that's where it starts, just permission to open up the door. And just, you know, keep working on it, keep asking God to show you that picture in your prayer time and say, God, I want to be on a journey with my family. I want to be on a journey in my heart to have that door open. To have that door wide open. Because you want to have that, you know, that breathing thing that Boyd was talking about last week about the love of God. You know, we receive love, so it should just flow out of us as well. It's the same thing as vulnerability and healing. It's like we receive healing from Jesus, so we should flow out healing. And we should nothing should ever be contained in our hearts. I believe there's even people here with names stained on your hearts, like mine, stained on your heart, and you have such a bitterness and offense against that person. And you're waiting, this is what I did, I was waiting for them to come first to say sorry. I'm like, I'm not the one in the wrong here, they were. So I'm just going to be patient. I'm going to use God's patience and just wait for them to say sorry first. But the freedom that I found, I remember sitting in my bedroom and writing all the names in the journal of all the people over the years that I just went, when I think of someone that's hurt me, what's that first name? And I just, it was a full list. And I did this, I pushed it in front of me like that and said, Jesus, I don't want this to live in my heart anymore. I don't want them to be in my heart anymore, because you say to forgive them, and today I'm choosing that I'm not going to wait for their sorries. I'm going to release them from my heart and say, I choose to say that they're human, they're weak, but together we can be strong, and I choose to release them from my heart. And I just felt like my shoulders were heavy for years. My heart was drenched in hatred for people, and I just felt tears flowed, and I just felt this weight lift off my shoulders. So I'd encourage you to do that as well. If you have people, even in this church, and you just go, you know what, I still have this little, like when I see them, I just go, oh, if everyone could just know what they've done and what they did and what they said, let it go, release it, release it. Release it from your heart. What's the thing about unforgiveness? It's like allowing someone to stay in your heart rent-free. Is that right? I'm terrible remembering, but just, it's not, because why? Because it becomes so toxic. It becomes like black poison in your heart. The love of God can't be pulsating in there if there's black poison going around and around. You want that heart to be beating loud and proud for Jesus and for other people. You want it to almost, when you see someone, this is the point my heart's at. When I see someone, I can hear my heart beating for them. I can hear my heart beating for them, because I'm like, I don't even know you, but I love you. I love you. Yeah, so I just encourage people just to be on that journey with us and to heal. And it's okay to cry. That's just the last thing I want to say. It's totally okay to cry in church. We should have more tears in church. This is a hospital. We come in messy, broken, and who's to say that those tears aren't tears of joy? You know, who's to judge someone's tears? But tears are there, they're designed. God designed tears, and we have to, it's a part of us actually releasing and letting it flow. Who feels better after a cry? Anyone? Sometimes you just need a good cry.
Yeah, why don't we just sing one more song and just ponder all that, and why don't we stand up? We can invite the band up to help us, and we'll just pray for you before we sing once more.
Do you reckon we could even just open up the altar for people to come down and just even just maybe taking a step.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was going to say, wherever you are, even if you, just as a signal to God, like not even right now, but when we close our eyes, just, even if you're just in your chair, just to go, Lord, I'm going to take one more step forward in this vulnerability thing. And you can most welcome, if you're just like, damn it, I want to go the whole way. I don't know if I can say that in church, but anyway. You're welcome to come out the front as this song is played and just say, God, thank you that it's okay, that I'm not okay, and that I'm a work in progress and all of that. And so why don't we just close our eyes?